5 dark web horror stories that will leave you traumatized while listening. Has anything scary or creepy happened to you when accessing the dark web? Well, sit back and relax as we take you through these exciting but fearful stories that send shivers down your spine. Now, before we begin, there is something you must know about the dark web. It can either make you or break you. Story 1. My work on the dark web. Hi there, I'm Brian. I'm from the US and I'm 25 years old. I also had a job on the dark web once. The dark web isn't what you think, so hold on to your torches and pitchforks before you get too excited. It's not drugs, firearms, or porn. No. Most concern money solutions, software sharing, forums, and news leaks. There are many things in it, but not many of them are what today's media would have you believe. And it makes sense that there would be many job opportunities on the dark web, given the abundance of services available. Before I decided to leave, I had been employed there for a good few years. In case you're wondering why I stopped, that's a tale for another time. I'll start where it makes the most sense for the time being. I will start from the beginning when I was in college and part-time. I studied engineering and worked at McDonald's, everyone's favorite fast food restaurant. This kept me busy, but I also used my free time to explore the dark web. I used to visit a few forums focused on global news that the media would not report on. Seeing a side of the world that the media did not want you to see piqued my curiosity about this kind of stuff. You know what? It was real. However, I gradually became a part of the community for one of such forum. I knew many folks who were frequent posters there. Some were investigative journalists, some were PIs, and some had more colorful personalities. The common thread among them was that they all had a propensity to learn things they shouldn't have and wanted to communicate them. They, therefore, disseminate these forbidden facts through this forum. I will elaborate on the other ones later, but concentrate on Sam for now. Sam was one of those revolutionaries who was always looking for corporate and governmental conspiracy evidence. Nut jobs, the kind I'm referring to. However, Sam's unique quality is that he can support his views with evidence. He had references and proof, and now I'll tell you how I came to be one of those sources. It was a typical Sunday, and I had the day off because I don't work on Sundays. I used it to put off doing things on the deep web and the clear net. While browsing the forum I mentioned earlier, I noticed Sam had sent me a direct message. I trusted Sam since he was a genuine, honest guy, and he told me a lot about himself that added up. I, therefore, tried to be just as sincere when he asked me questions. This implied that he knew my town and that something was happening there. Now, I live in a developing town, so quite a lot is always going on, but this was not your normal developing town stuff. Apparently, the local council was blackmailing one of the landowners to force them to sell their land for development. The landowner in question was a farmer who owned a sizable piece at the edge of the urban sprawl. After reading this, I responded to Sam with the usual, "That's cool, thanks for the info." But then he replied with, "But there's more to this. I don't know what they're using as blackmail, but it has to be big. That farmer makes way too much money off his land to sell at the price they're demanding." Intrigued, I asked Sam if there was any way he could find out more. That's when he asked, "Yes, if you're willing to help." Now I had never actively discovered any of this hidden news stuff, only browsed it. That's what made me and Sam such good friends. But he asked me to get involved. It had me at a crossroads. I left my deep web browser without replying. Rude, I know, but I didn't quite know how to reply. I tried to focus on the latest game theory video, but I couldn't get the thought out of my head. Could I reveal some hidden news? Like some conspiracy? I logged back into the forum, muting Sam Cliff's dulcet theorist tones, and replied to Sam. "What are you asking me to do?" I waited with bated breath for the response. "Just talk to the guy, maybe take some pictures, nothing crazy. These people tend to be more than happy to tell someone about this crap." I looked at the response and pondered. "What's the danger? Anything I should know?" I replied. "No danger. Unusually for a farmer, he doesn't have a gun license, so you should be fine. Just talk to him." I should mention that by this point, Sam had told me the farmer's name and address, but I'm opting to leave that information out for all of our safety. As I was considering taking Sam up on his offer, he sent another message. "I'll pay. What's your PayPal?" I froze. I had no idea that Sam paid his sources. I slowly typed out one of my many PayPal emails. You have to have lots in order to move money on the deep web. 250 euros now, then 250 euros after you give me the juice. I almost fainted after reading that sentence. A whopping sum of 500 euros for driving to a farmer's house and talking to him. That was almost too good to be true. I responded with a sharp, "Yeah," and waited, refreshing the email associated with that PayPal account. Bam. Dear Brian, you have received 250 euros from 4e59ry8@hotmail.com. I checked the PayPal account and sure enough, 250 euros was sitting there. Sent. You'd better not run away with my money now. I forgot I was talking to Sam. No, of course I'll head down tomorrow evening and talk to him. Want me to record it or anything? Heart beating, I awaited his reply. Not at all. I'll believe what you say. I'll send someone else up to confirm it if I'm unsure. In my town, did he have another source? Why then was I selected? I put those questions away and expressed my gratitude for this excellently compensated job. In the meantime, I concluded the discussion by saying, "Talk tomorrow, Sam," and retired to bed. I refused to sleep because I couldn't sleep with all of this garbage going through my mind. I took a car to the farm after class the following day. You could see the building companies establishing themselves in the pastures nearest the suburbs. I came to the farmhouse's drive after driving along a dusty road. I could feel every bump as I descended. My car was not designed for off-roading. After locking my car, I rang the front door, but no one answered. My mind was racing with anticipation as my heart pounded against my ribs. I knocked once more and decided to shout, "Greetings? Mister, are you present? I'm here to discuss your land arrangement with you." I heard the sound of the lock twisting and then some shuffling behind the door. I saw his face, the chain still on. His appearance was that of a traditional Old English farmer with a flat cap. "What do you want to discuss?" With a tone full of sorrow, he asked. "I'm here to talk about the..." I took great care in what I said next to show him I supported him. "Your agreement's circumstances and their bias against you. Could you tell me more about the matter so I can assist you?" As my speech concluded, I started to lose confidence. Although he didn't appear strong, his glance was intimidating. His expression softened, and he motioned for me to come in as he opened the door. I was wondering when a journalist would show interest, and I can tell you that it's open-ended. It is as simple as it is evident. Still, I took a seat in his primitive living room. It's safe to conclude that the furniture predates him by a significant amount. "Sir, I'm not a journalist, or at the very least, I doubt it. Not the traditional kind, anyhow." Despite being incredibly nervous, I forced myself to keep a confident face. My words got his attention. "Oh, tea?" His gloomy expression seemed to lift as he asked. Maybe it was intended for unwelcome guests, and my comments convinced him to give in to my wishes. "Please say yes, no sugar in the milk. I'll wait to ask questions until we both feel at ease." I sat there thinking, what the hell was I doing, while he made the tea. The fragile china seemed as if it would break any moment when he set the cup in front of me. Maybe I wasn't thirsty after all, I thought. That cup was quite costly. "All right, my child, what interests you?" I met his gaze as I peered over the antique coffee table. "I've heard that your situation has come about because of some information being used against you." His expression was shock and fear, like that of a scalded kid. "Yes, that is true. How did you come about that information?" I stammered, unsure of how to respond. "One of my friends is interested in your situation. In order to assist you, he would like to know more." The elderly farmer took a moment to peer down into his cup. "If I say anything, it should never go to the cops, all right?" For an instant, my heart appeared to stop. How could this older man have done anything that would have raised such red flags and suspicions that the police were unaware of? He may have read my thoughts from my look, because he groaned and started to explain after glancing at me. "My wife is very a beautiful woman. She wouldn't hurt a fly, ever. However, some inebriated youths from the city arrived a few months ago. When they broke into the farmhouse, we remained silent and exchanged glances. She gave me a shake of her head as if to urge me to shut up. She took her shotgun out of the gun safe under our bed. "But I was told you don't have a gun license," I cut in. His face flushed a little. "It is not me, young man, but my wife. Those days she does most of the labor. She managed to remove it and unlatch the door. I heard shots, but I'm not sure what happened." Head in hand, the older man began to cry. "I couldn't figure it out." "Ah!" "What can you say to that? Some kids broke in, so his wife shot them?" "Sir, what happened after?" With a sniffle, he wiped his eyes and turned to face me. "We hid them and buried them, but cops traced it here, and next thing we know, some council suit is here telling us to sell or we'd go down for murder." With a heavy sigh, he put his head in his hands and waited for an answer. "Why not go public? They broke into your property. It's undoubtedly self-defense." He shot me a piercing glance. "The mayor's sons were those boys. I will fall if I go public. Should I fail to sell?" I was practically crying when I stood up, my heart in my throat. "I appreciate your time. I'll investigate my options." He stood beside me, a pained look plastered across his face. "I'll see you out, lad." His wife was standing in the entryway with a shotgun slung over her arm when I approached the door. She was by no means youthful, but she was also not as elderly as the male. She stepped aside and gave me a chilly glare. The other door stood open. I scrambled to get the keys in the ignition and drove home, virtually running to my car. I was still shaking from my prior experience as I sat at my laptop. With my hands still almost shitting, I was typing up my report to Sam. I would have perished in that farmhouse if I had said something wrong. Considering the length of my communication, he responded right away. "Brian, that's quite the tale. People are going to adore it. I will try my best to help the unfortunate couple. And for you, take into account the risks. I've given you the remaining funds, plus a bit more. I apologize, I was unaware that the wife was armed. Upon checking my PayPal account, I discovered that 600 euros had been added. This could not be real. There had to be a joke here indeed. But the agreed amount was 250 euros, right?" I typed quickly. This story is better than I had anticipated. "Brian, I'll be in contact." I decided to end our day's communication there. I had just been paid 850 euros for discussing a murder with an older man in a field. What the hell? All right. That was my first work on the dark web and the reason for this insane situation. That was not the last time I heard from Sam, and it was not the previous online job I did. All I have to say for now will focus on Sam and his jobs. It had been a few weeks since I finished working for Sam. Thanks to Sam's substantial compensation, I had spent those weeks impulsively purchasing everything I could find on Amazon, including a new laptop. I tried to hide my purchases so no one would question me, but hiding a brand new laptop is difficult. I had a week off, paid vacation from my job, and everything because college had broken for the half term. I was idling away hours on the internet, as usual. I had developed a new interest and was fascinated by the old couple Sam had assigned me to speak with. The older woman, Lori, turns out to have a criminal history of ABH, violence, and assault. While I could not get much information about them on the clear net, I found something intriguing about them on the dark web. Furthermore, this record was made 12 years ago. It wasn't from her adolescence. Somehow she got away with a fine and community service, I suppose, because an OAP could not be imprisoned. I was going to conduct more research, but then it struck me, I know someone who is an expert at this stuff, right? I messaged Sam to see if he had any other information or had done any more investigation. I rarely receive a response right away from him. When he answered, he only responded, "Yes, we must speak. However, not right now." This naturally frightened me. What had Sam discovered? Indeed, assault charges weren't all that fascinating. The events of my last post continue to bother me. That woman was standing right there, goddamned having killed 2 children. I felt awful for the older man, but I was not going anywhere near that location ever again. It would be best if they left as soon as possible. Sam responded to me after a few hours. "The tale is not over yet. I've been reading through the local news reports. Not all of the missing children in recent years are the mayor's offspring." My thoughts were racing. I instantly assumed that the older woman was a serial killer or something like that, because she appeared to be capable of such behavior. "All the missing persons tend to be teenagers, with parents in positions of power in the town." He included a link to a file-sharing website on ClearNet in this message. It included police reports with images of the missing people. I'll never know how Sam obtained these, but I immediately noticed a tendency. There was undoubtedly a common thread among the sons of the police inspector, the mayor, and a local businesswoman. Well, what does this signify? Because now that I know this, there's no way I'm going back into that house. Even though I responded with a strong sense of dread and terror, I couldn't help but feel a tiny thrill at this realization. Was I considering leaving Sam to work for someone else? I'll set up a time and place for you to meet with my other source. You have the whole week off, I know. He assured me he didn't hack my computer to figure that out, so he pleaded with me not to jump to conclusions. We're good pals, like I said. At a town coffee shop, I met Smith, Sam's second source. Because you can never be too careful, I brought a friend along. Photographer Smith worked full-time for Sam as a professional. I'd rather not know, but I had no idea of what that means. To my friend's relief, I told him he may leave once I confirmed his legitimacy. Smith appeared to be a disheveled man in his 30s. The best way to describe him is that he seems to stroll off the street. He even had that scent. We work together now. His accent sounded like something from Eastern Europe. I've never been good at accents, so I'm unsure exactly where it originated. In contrast to popular belief, he spoke English reasonably well. You have a car? With a steady expression, he questioned. Yeah, it's parked out front. Yes, my jalopy was outside the coffee shop, but I had no idea why he was interested in it. We monitor the woman while we take it to the farm. Recognize? Slowly nodding, I wasn't sure I was free to say no. All right, we're off now. I detest coffee. It makes me act inappropriately. You can't dispute that. The travel out of town somewhat rattled me, and I wasn't sure how much money I would make when I returned. I had forgotten to ask Sam for the pay in my hurry. There was a small extension of the building at the couple farm's edge, and I could see a group of thoughtful workers laying foundations. I decelerated as soon as I was outside the bustling town. I went down an even more overgrown and neglected lane that led to an abandoned barn on the couple's property, bypassing the road to the farmhouse. Smith busied himself with the duffel bag he brought along, and I parked so that I was barely visible from the barn. He took out several expensive-looking cameras and started aiming them at the barn and fields behind the car through the back left window. The field where the barn stood was surrounded by a row of shrubs, giving the area a foreboding, cramped air. Smith, being a professional, didn't appear to sense this at all. The setup looked quite good when he was finished, but I have yet to learn what half the junk he had in there. We deployed field sensors, so we might locate the old lady's walking path. You lock up your car, and I'll murder you if you steal my camera, Smith said to me. With a gaze that hinted at a hint of humor, I responded with a shaky laugh. We carried small cameras, similar to GoPros, with antennas attached and strolled around the property. Occasionally, we would pause and affix one of the cameras somewhere, usually aimed toward outbuildings or barns. This continued for almost an hour until the skies grew dark. The night had come quickly after we arrived, with dusk already beginning to fall. In the distance, I could make out the lights of the farmhouse. There, we require sensors. You place this there, Smith said, despite being smaller. I had a terrified expression on my face as I stared at Smith. It was clear from his expression that there was no disputing his assertion. I grabbed one of his sensors and skulked over to the bushes bordering the farmhouse. I was crouched in the mud, staring at the farmhouse with my heart hammering hard against my chest. Pointing toward the front door, I positioned one of the sensors in a shrub. The farmhouse was small, so it took me only a short time to crawl to the back. I froze when I noticed a figure in one of the downstairs windows. I almost shit myself there and then, damn you. I didn't need coffee, unlike Smith, to piss myself off. All I needed was a crazy older woman with a shotgun. There was a canopy over the back door. There was no certainty that a sensor would detect movement from the shrubs. I needed to approach closer. I tore up my new jeans as I painfully and painstakingly dragged myself over the shrubs surrounding the farmhouse. I crept around the back of the house and noticed a small garage with a partially open door. I approached it cautiously, like a soldier in hostile territory. However, that analogy was not entirely inaccurate. Clutter from years past had piled high in the garage. I positioned the sensor inside and oriented it toward the farmhouse's back door. I heard the rear door open as I turned to go back. My heart fell. Afraid for my life, I scrambled into a top-heavy wardrobe and sat behind it, preferably out of sight. I wasn't too concerned about the garage's stench of trash. The older woman entered the backyard while toting a garbage bag. I breathed a little relief as she tossed the bag into a giant garbage, turned, and headed back into the farmhouse. Even though I knew she was gone, I waited a long time before coming out of the garage, returning to the line of shrubs, stopping again, and returning to Smith. "Why did it take you so long? It's not rocket science, it's just a sensor." Smith yelled, pulled out a laptop, and started to type. Occasionally, a beeping noise from the laptop's speakers would startle me out of my sleep. "Every sensor functions. We are currently waiting. You go to bed first, and if I need you, I'll wake you." Smith sat up, ending the pause. In return, I groaned. I wasn't waiting for his approval to fall asleep entirely. I was already half asleep. I have no idea how long I was asleep before he woke me up. "Look, the woman is shifting." His booming voice called out to me, "Wake up, dumbhead," startling me out of my sleep. "What?" With my thoughts still half asleep, I asked. From the back seat, he kicked the back of my chair. "The lady, she's coming this way." This startled me even more, so I turned to face Smith and saw his face lit up by his laptop screen. "Where is she now?" With his laptop lid closed, he gestured to his left window. She was heading toward the deserted barn and had just broken through the tree line. I dropped into my seat and prayed she wouldn't see the automobile while I looked over. She disappeared into the barn. Smith turned to face me. Oddly, he appeared to be as anxious as I was. In a whisper, he said, "Go. Remain low. I take the lead. If she notices us, we flee. So leave the key in the ignition." I could only agree with one thing he stated out of everything else. We run. At that moment, I found the thought more than just appealing. We both carefully opened and closed the car doors so as not to create any noise. Smith took the lead in the meantime, moving with the deliberate gait of a ninja, staying close to the shadows. This was not his maiden voyage. He went up to a low window on the barn wall, and as we got there, he peered through it, lowered the camera, and looked through the viewfinder. Unambiguous. He spoke in a whisper, his voice almost heard above the night's hush. We entered the building, and I trailed him as he went through a doorway that didn't appear to have a door for a while. Of course, the barn was empty. However, there appeared to be light coming from the floors themselves, as it emanated from one of the furthest corners. Upon coming closer, we noticed a floor hatch flung open, revealing steps descending below. Smith followed suit and signed for me to move behind a rusting tractor. With a loud thudding sound, he picked up a loose stone from the floor and hurled it towards the distant wall. With a look of fear, I fixed him with my gaze. He just looked at me composedly while covering his lips with his finger. Immediately the light went out, and I heard the older woman walking up the stairs. I saw her surveying the barn from the corner of my eye, and then she returned to the hatch. Her frantic footsteps as she fled the barn were followed by the sound of the hatch being slammed, and another metallic bang. Before we dared to emerge from our hiding place, Smith and I sat silently for about 30 minutes. Smith pulled out his phone and opened an app configured to use the sensors. To our great relief, he stated, "She's gone." Either that, or I was ready to sprint to the car and go as far away from here as possible. I felt like collapsing right then. Together, we stood and strolled across the dilapidated barn to the hatch. On the hatch was a gleaming new padlock that stood out against the dull wood of the floor. Smith muttered, "Hold on," and handed his camera to me. He spent several minutes fiddling with the lock. I could not see what he was doing, but then I heard a metallic click, and he opened the hatch carefully. Pulling out a flashlight, he switched it on and directed the beam on the shadows below. I experienced an ineffable animal terror at that moment, similar to what one could have if facing a pack of starving wolves. I was sure that whatever was down there was terrible, so I did not want to descend those stairs. Smith started the drop without seeming to be fazed. He turned to face me, and I had a distinct impression that I looked pitiful. "Please come, believe me." Indeed, I will put my trust in a man I recently met as we enter a spooky barn that used to belong to a vicious older woman. Fantastic concept. His gaze remained fixed on mine. Do you want to get paid? He growled as he spoke. Was I now being paid by Smith? Oh no, I might as well have died for money if I was going to die. I followed Smith closely as I descended into the menacing blackness. When we reached the bottom of the steps, we saw a small room with a door off at one end, a corkboard full of papers, and a workbench. However, the fragrance struck me before the views. The smell was of decay. I'm sure this is the stench of death if there were any. Smith got to work and started taking pictures of practically everything. After giving me a flashlight, he added, "Look at the board here. Check to see if the photo is worth anything." I approached the board and started reviewing the documents pinned to it. There were news articles about the missing kids, images of them, and information about how the town grew into the nearby farms. Among these were handwritten notes in an elegant script that said things like, "Lives in Y location," or "Drinks at X pub." It's hard to describe the goosebumps this caused me. This older woman had been observing those children and determining the ideal time to attack. Oh God. Smith placed his hand on my shoulder, causing me to have a minor tantrum. Smith smiled and backed away. "I am playing with you. I'm through with this. We're heading out right now." That was beyond me to argue with. After returning to the car, Smith reviewed the footage on his laptop. What was behind that door? With a hint of wonder in my voice, I asked, It is best if you don't know. You performed well. Let's head out now. I'll return tomorrow to pick up the sensors." Another brilliant thought. In this instance, it seemed best the less I knew. I started driving back into town, driving right by that awful farmhouse. After dropping Smith off in a suburban area, I returned to my apartment. I was so damned exhausted. Smith handed me a piece of paper with an email before he departed, adding, "You good child, send a message using your email. When I need assistance again, I'll let you know." He also passed me a heavy packet, so even though I wasn't sure what I did to help, I must have done something right. It was filled with 20 euros in bills when I opened it. Upon arriving home, I tallied them and found 1,000 euros. Unexpectedly, I was starting to believe that this would not be a horrible career. Don't ask questions, do my work and get my pay. Working with Sam was a great idea, and Smith? It was even better. Even yet, I couldn't help but wonder what was behind the door. It's not like I would discover for myself, quite the opposite. I believe I've had enough of that farm. However, I never was able to identify the source of the scent. I decided not to return to the farmhouse, no matter how much money was involved, following the second round of events there. Yes, I was inquisitive and liked the grand I had to spend. However, returning there would cut my life expectancy by 60 years, and I wanted to live. And just being back there would have probably caused my death from heart arrest if the elderly woman hadn't shot me. Sam had been hard at work studying the case. He's replied to my messages with one word only occasionally. I'm worried about him all the time. Not just the scary old lady, but this whole event feels strange. I decided to conduct some independent research to find something to assist Sam. Honestly, I do not know. But on the other hand, I may die in any case. I began by looking into the instances of the missing kids. According to online records, the mayor's 2 children vanished a few months ago. Taking into account that the elderly woman may have shot them only a few weeks earlier, those kids vanished before arriving at the farmhouse, or that old man was lying. The other children had all disappeared within 2 months from one another. Every single account is the same. They disappeared while out to see a friend or attend an event. There was no sign of them, no lead, and no eyewitness. Every one of them was a dead case. When 2 of the influential people's children show up at a farmhouse on the outskirts of town, they get shot, and then the guy who shot them is suddenly blackmailed by the same influential people who caused all the trouble in the first place. Maybe it wasn't the older woman's fault after all. But what's going on? Will another child go missing soon? Who, if so? How did Sam get so skilled at these things? More importantly, how does he have the money to pay people? Was there a boss he was working for? This entire train of thought reinforced my central thesis, that there are many unanswered questions. However, there are some queries you don't wish to have to address. Why did the older woman own that corkboard if she wasn't the murderer? Maybe she was also searching for the truth. It dawned on me. Yes, indeed, Smith. I emailed Smith asking if he had any pictures of the corkboard and telling him to contact me if he needed any help. He quickly responded saying, "Brian, I have images but can't reveal them to you. Ask Sam, he owns the photos, not me. I appreciate you informing me about your email. If I have work, I will let you know. You're a good child." I let out a defeated sigh. Sam would never answer yes, even if I asked. Smith worked for him, so I didn't want to offend him, but... "Please, Smith, I really need those pictures. I'm investigating the same case as Sam. I'll give you money." Ironically, I was about to propose paying Smith the same amount he had just paid me. "I've uploaded the pictures, Brian. You owe me a job. I've delivered the link. It expires in 5 minutes." Smith's arguments are usually tricky to refute, mainly when they are concerned with keeping my money. I clicked on the link and downloaded the pictures right away. Since it was a ClearNet link, I had 90% confidence that the files were secure. I looked at the pictures, gathering as much information as I could. After spending several hours going through the photos, I didn't go very far, but I did discover that every single child was involved in drug use. Hardcore stuff only, weed and a few milder medications. Having wealthy parents must allow you to afford to do such foolish things. I'm not sure how the older woman knew this, but I didn't understand anything about that hag. The 2 children who broke into the farmhouse were marijuana sellers. They were active in the community, although it was unclear where they obtained their medicines. All the other children appeared to be users. Additionally, the kids would frequently visit the same eateries, shops, and bars. It looks like they were all pals. Even with this new knowledge, I still didn't understand what was happening. A group of pals who use drugs gradually disappear, and then 2 of them break into the house of an older woman who is keeping an eye on them. I was still far from understanding anything meaningful about this, and it was all quite confusing. You might be wondering how I went about looking into drug trafficking in my town. You guessed it, dark web. I returned to my preferred discussion board and began posing as a customer to ask questions. I located a nearby dealer and made an appointment with him to purchase some cannabis. I asked for 2 spliffs of marijuana because I didn't know how much it cost or how much to buy. The guy was waiting in the entryway of an apartment building when I met him there after a quick trip into the town center. I had brought 500 euros of the 1,000 euros that Smith had given me. Naturally, I wasn't here for drugs. I was here for answers. I gave the man a firm handshake. After we spoke for a while, he gave me some information about the nearby sellers, offered me the money, and said, I wanted to know who had hurt my friend. It seems that the business owner whose child vanished had been embezzling money from the company to operate a town-wide drug trafficking operation on the dark web. The boss and the fact that the trade was conducted over the dark web were the only other details the dealer was aware of. The man claimed that the dark web gave him the chills. He used it for operations, as the boss preferred. He added that he was aware of the recent takeout of 2 dealers. He only knew that they were gone. He had no idea who had done it. After thanking him, I left for home. Was this what it meant to be Sam? It was pretty thrilling. Finding information was tricky in this situation, but at least it was no longer hopelessly complex. It nearly made this worthwhile. Oh, and by the way, I never really purchased the marijuana. He did end up smoking it after all, but 500 euros is obviously enough to buy some very essential information. So a group of friends who used drugs went missing while out to hang out with their friends. The dealers of those kids work for a guy on the dark web, and their kids are friends with those kids. The dealers break into the home of the person looking into them and kill themselves. The other kids are still missing. I could see from all of this that the businessman was dishonest. I quickly messaged an old buddy I met on the dark web, inquiring whether she had any contacts or had worked in the field. She responded to me a few hours later. Hey, stranger. I've run a couple of jobs, long time no talk. What's going on? Something not quite right? I couldn't think of anything to say in response. Shall I be honest with her? Some dealer attacked a friend of mine. All I want to do is find out who they were. I hesitated, picking my following few sentences with a terrible inhumanity. But they vanished a couple of weeks ago. Have any knowledge? I held out. The seconds passed and my breath caught in my throat. Ah, I am familiar with the man. I frequently get drops from him. Mostly cannabis, correct? When I last saw him, he spread rumors about an observer of their job. At his residence, he was accompanied by a few children who appeared to be around his age. As always, half of them were staring at me. Silly children. After acknowledging that I had been somewhat busy lately, I thanked her for her assistance and promised to speak with her more frequently. I was starting to understand what was happening. A group of youths band together, each with influential parents who can provide support and launch a dark web drug operation. They could operate a respectable, risk-free business with the help of the mayor, the police inspector, an assisting business owner, and the children, and anyone attempting to get in the way. Just have a peek at the elderly couple. I considered what Sam might be aware of. Could he be of assistance? I wrote an email including all the details I had discovered and the references. I spent about an hour writing it up. His response arrived sooner than it had in the past. Brian, holy crap, you've been working for me, huh? I attempted to learn the same things but could not meet with any contacts due to my distance. I thought about asking you to work for me again, but I don't have to. Well done, dude. I'll start working to learn more. I need you to keep quiet for the time being. It's safe to state that some possibly dangerous people are behind this, as I have searched higher up the pyramid than you have. I assume you use the same account for your money as before? I had found more than Sam, but I was lost. Were these individuals dangerous? I understand that they attacked the older woman, but from here on, where did it go? I nearly forgot Sam had just offered to pay me because I thought so much about this. I said yes and wished him success, and sure enough, my account had an additional 900 euros. Jesus, this was an excellent financial investment. And yet, was I going to take a chance by defying Sam and doing further research? I was at a loss for what to do. Despite the situation's inherent creepiness, I was hooked and eager to learn more about this developing narrative. Sam's advice to be quiet also included staying off the dark web. I removed myself from the internet and lived a normal life for a while. I attempted to continue my college coursework and part-time work as if everything was okay, but there was a severe problem. Every moment I saw the dealer, I grew increasingly uneasy. Sure, I had paid for knowledge, but I had also paid for his quiet. That older woman was attacked. It was not a risk I wanted to take. I concluded it could be time to relax and spend some time away from town. I contacted several family members and offered to take my grandmother along for a week of visits. The family hardly ever came together these days, and our opportunities to spend time together were dwindling. I took my grandmother by car to her old house on the outskirts of town. Her scent was that of her go-to perfume. It was almost comforting to forget about my predicament when I saw her again. I saw the construction site as I was leaving town. I could make out the scaffolding and frames for the vast residential suburb to be built. And I passed that farmhouse as I continued down the road. Being away from town was pleasant. I'm not allowed to discuss it too much for obvious reasons. My family getting sucked into it is the last thing I need. I left my granny with my family and started my late-night drive home to avoid the gridlock. I claimed a family emergency to get time off from employment and college. However, when I approached the town, I noticed a different emergency. The area was filled with blue flashing lights as the road near the farmhouse was shut. I stopped my car, and a policeman came over. "Road's closed, kid. If you want to get into town, turn back and take the next 2 rights." With my eyes revealing my disbelief, I glanced at him. "What's wrong, son?" The officer spoke in a calm, curious voice. "Nothing, sir. I used to visit the man who lived here. Is he okay?" The officer appeared to lose interest, and his look softened to sympathy. In the nearby precinct, I was seated. Sergeant Fred was the police officer's name. He inquired about my understanding of the relationship and possible outcomes. See, a gas explosion allegedly murdered them. Honesty, I didn't buy it. Officer Fred didn't seem to be either, based on the circumstances. I had to keep my mouth shut for obvious reasons. I made up the story I used to check on the older man for my grandma, who I said knew him. He readily accepted the narrative involving a young volunteer visiting an elderly couple. He then discussed the explosion and inquired if I had ever smelled something strange in the house, or if I had any theories as to what might have caused the leak. I mentioned that they were cautious individuals, and the man was a skilled handyman who could handle most household maintenance. All falsehoods, of course, but the main one was the claim that their demise was accidental. This was not closed, nor was the case as a whole. Thanks for the help, kid. I know this must be hard for you. He ripped the page from his notebook, scribbled a phone number, and gave it to me. If you ever need help, or remember anything, give me a call. I gave him my thanks and walked away. I sat back at my laptop and thought I should see how Sam was doing. However, he had outdone me. He had about 20 emails that I had missed. He was an all-knowing man. Smith appeared to have been pursuing the location again at the time of the incident. He assumed that Smith or I would be targeted next, but I was out of town, and Smith was an expert. For the time being, we should both be relatively safe. The good news is that Smith used a tracking device in his car to track the attacker back into town. They had pulled into the town's industrial sector and parked at a warehouse. I can't send Smith, Brian. I know you've put yourself at enough risk for this case already. All I want of you is to enter and recognize anyone present. We can unravel this entire situation if you obtain a positive ID against any of the missing children or their parents. Oh no. In this instance, I was in too deep. You had better pay me pretty well for this. Those idiots are murderers, I answered, feeling a mixture of fear and rage in my head. I will pay you 5,000 euros if you enter and are given a valid ID. Use everything you have to snap photos. I sat there and gazed at the display, thinking. I wouldn't say I liked this, since the drive to the warehouse was always tinged with fear of the unknown and the inherent risk ahead. I wouldn't say I liked the fact that I was genuinely thrilled. I drove my car to a few warehouses and started walking over, hiding in the moonlight. I did not want to think about getting caught. I stood in front of the storage facility. Was this the ultimate result of all the research? Couldn't I have just waltzed in there? I turned around and went to the back, where a ladder was going up, and the whole structure was next to a few stacked crates. I tried it because I didn't want a squeaky ladder to generate a lot of noise. I climbed, confident that it would not reveal my identity. My heart was thumping hard, nearly exploding in my chest. When I got to the roof, I lay down and pushed myself forward until I came to a skylight. It had a foil covering on it. Subsequently, I noticed the internal roof access in the roof's corner across from me. I moved over gingerly, being extremely careful not to make any noise. Below me, I heard voices and movement outside the warehouse. Peeping over the roof's edge, I spotted two men in black clothing conversing. I did not doubt that one of them had a gun in his hand. I removed my phone and took care to turn off the flash. I took a photograph. The people were barely visible due to the poor lighting, and the pistol appeared as a faint shadow. At the door leading into the warehouse, I knelt. I saw it was a fire escape because the alarm system was installed in the door's corner. Fortunately, I understood how to disarm it because I was an electrical engineering student. I took out the power supply and carefully disarmed it before opening the door. Silently and gently, it opened. Panic began to creep in as I stood at the top of the stairway. I ducked low, glancing over the edge of the floor to see into the warehouse and down the stairway. I noticed the same foil from the skylight and bright lighting. The warehouse floor was covered in plants, with light heating and illuminating them. I was sweating despite a cool breeze coming in through the open fire exit door, not totally due to the heat though. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. People were moving amongst the crops, a couple with machetes and a few openly carrying firearms. I had never seen anything as ridiculous as this. At that moment, I saw some recognizable figures seated at a table at the furthest end of the warehouse. It was the children who went missing. I had assumed they were part of the operation, but since they were strapped to their seats, it was apparent they had no consent to the events that were taking place. Alongside them sat a guard. My phone's camera could not capture a clear enough picture of my location, so I had to do that down the stairs. With the metal railing failing to hide me, I crawled to the bottom of the steps. Fortunately, I was surrounded by 3 walls, because I was in a corner, and another wall surrounded me. This allowed me to remain mostly hidden. However, I was in a tight spot and needed to act fast if one of the guards decided to head to the roof. When I reached the bottom, I placed a probe behind the steps. I was so close to making the shot. To To pull this off, I need to be in the open for a very brief moment. After waiting for the guards circling the crops to get out of the way of the stairway, I stood and snapped a few fast phone pictures, just a few of which were sharp. And with that, I dove back into my hiding spot. I tried my hardest not to let my terrified breathing be audible. I heard footsteps approaching as I started the slow, dangerous climb. I crawled quickly to the door and cautiously closed it. I turned away from the roof access door and happily found myself back in the cool night air. The door alarm was never linked correctly in the first place when I heard the guard leave onto the roof. There was a slight click, and I heard more footsteps going up the stairwell. I pulled out my phone once more and started to record a video. The crucial thing at this point was what the guards were saying, even though I couldn't see them. I can't tell you what the guards talked about, but I will eventually tell you everything. I was still standing there, paralyzed with fear. I needed to leave this roof. The structure was around 2 floors high with concrete beneath me. The main issue was that the roof access's rear wall was right up against the warehouse wall, but an open dumpster surrounded it. I would have to leap, and if I was lucky, I might land in the dumpster. Repositioning my phone in my pocket, I braced myself and leaped. As I plummeted into the air, I experienced a rush of unfathomable joy mixed with terror. It was peculiar. The sensation of falling was almost exhilarating, yet all I could think was, I'm going to die. I gave the dumpster a gentle thud. Although it was loud, it wasn't nearly as loud as my cries as I had struck the concrete. However, as soon as I landed, I felt a terrible pain in my foot, and tears welled up in my eyes. I bit down on my hand to keep from screaming in agony. I returned to my car and made the torturous trip home. My foot hurt, but I thought it would be better if I had a shower first. It wouldn't help me if I showed up looking like a homeless guy with bad breath. Although it didn't appear fractured, it was extremely swollen, and I also had bruises from where I had fallen up my right arm and leg. Explaining this would be challenging. I sent the images and video after connecting my phone to my PC. I kept them in several locations just in case. I returned to my car and drove to A&E, putting my phone back in my pocket. Getting seen took almost 2 hours. I was sitting there feeling incredibly agitated for a million different reasons. After seeing me, the doctor tied everything up and offered me some medication. It turned out that I had a rather severe sprain, and that I would need to take it very easy so as not to injure my tendon. Considering the fall, things could have turned out much worse for me. I sent Sam everything when I got home. I was waiting breathlessly for his response. You succeeded in doing it, not that I was expecting to encounter a weed farm, much less those youngsters. Well done. Brian. To avoid suspicion, I'll need to distribute the funds over a few accounts or payments. When you can, get back to me with the specifics. And I did that. The total amount was precisely 5,000 euros. This was completely wild. If this information was so valuable, what on earth was I letting myself get into? Once I'd done my bit and received my compensation, I decided to try and get some sleep. I needed to rest my foot, so I decided to keep quiet. However, ideas were flying through my head. There won't be any sleep that night, or perhaps my final evening. I was aware that something was off. I had spent days by myself in my apartment. I hadn't worked or attended college. I spent too much time figuring out what was wrong with that warehouse. Sam and I had been investigating it together, and it appears to be the property of the business owner whose child went missing and was, ironically, kept in that same warehouse. We surmised that he was being held hostage. Unusually for Sam, he underlined that everyone should stay anonymous, and that the police shouldn't know that he had completed his final report to be uploaded on the site. He just said because this is not a normal case, and when I pressed him for an explanation. I'm concerned about him. Additionally, he provided me the final draft of the report with all the names intact, just in case. I keep seeing the same folks in the street, and they quickly leave when I notice them, so I fear I'm being followed. I'm getting very concerned. In other developments, Smith contacted me regarding an upcoming gig. After all, I owe him, so I'll have to get back to him. So far, Sam and I have deduced that the police inspector, the mayor, and a local business owner who owns the warehouse where all the children are being held are being blackmailed by someone. The old couple was assassinated by someone else, most likely because they knew too much, and the mayor's children were killed raiding their home. The facility served as a drug farm, selling drugs through dark web couriers and for sale on the dark web. We could pretty much sort out everything like this. My former dark web contact has informed me that the company was formerly operated by the 2 children whom the older woman killed, but after their deaths, I'm not sure who's in command. Now, the older woman has also vanished. I can't inquire about her knowledge, but perhaps there was anything in the basement that could be of assistance to me. My alternatives were limited, and this was the only way to obtain more relevant information, even though I had no desire to return to that farm. I hopped in and headed down the country route. I noticed that the construction was encroaching on the land of the elderly couple more quickly as I left the suburbs. A few of the initial homes appeared finished, with their windows illuminating the night sky. I was sorry for them. I had assumed the older woman was at fault, but she had only ever been a victim. But I still didn't know why she was doing it. Driving up the old dirt road, just like I had all those years before, I got closer to the barn in my car. I turned off the engine and escaped. There seemed to be a problem. The barn appeared to have been broken into. There were items all over the place and wide open doors that were still on their hinges. This was different from my taste. I cautiously approached the barn and peered toward the hatch in the back corner through an open doorway. I cautiously stepped inside after overhearing a distant conversation and positioned myself behind the rusty tractor, which appeared to have likewise been disassembled in an attempt to find something. As I got closer, I saw the light from the hatch, and the talk was getting louder. Nearly prone, I slithered to the top of the hatch. I had to find a way to get them out of there when I looked down the stairs and noticed movement. The farmhouse may have contained a fuse box. I reluctantly shifted my position and started the exhausting trek toward the farmhouse. Retracing the path, Smith and I walked to put up those cameras. My spine tingled as I realized the older woman and her spouse had passed away. Shame, he seems like a kind guy. A true gentleman would never give his finest porcelain cup to a visitor. I hopped across the shrub line when I got there. The entire farmhouse was covered in burn marks and was in a state of fire as a result of the gas explosion that destroyed half of the second level. I went up to the back door and threw off the hinges. It was covered in police tape. I stood in the farmhouse kitchen, ducking beneath it. At the same time, I was in the area I most wanted to avoid being, a crime scene. To put it mildly, this was unsettling. The living room across from the kitchen had a collapsed ceiling, making entering impossible. The gun safe, partially embedded in the floor and covered with tape, was situated in the living room. It appeared that the police had made fruitless attempts to pry it open. I opened a door in the kitchen that seemed to have been unaffected by the fire. Some stairs descended from it. One more basement? These people like storing items below the earth, including their conquerors' corpses. With caution, I lowered myself and flicked a switch to illuminate the room below, barely lit by a faint filament bulb. Shelves brimming with cleaning goods, laundry powders, dried food items, and even a wine rack. Sam was correct when he mentioned that the farmers profited greatly from their property. This location was abundantly supplied. I noticed a wall-mounted fuse box and another box adjacent to the stairway. I poked around in the fuse box. Handmade labels identified the many rooms of the house, one of which was the barn basement. I found the other box intriguing. There was a keyhole in it. I searched the lower level for a key. The shelves needed to be more noteworthy, but were a little dusty. After a good few minutes, I saw that there appeared to be some loose planks on the wall that was up against the staircase. I tried a couple, and the third from the left pulled away the easiest. It turned out that there was a crawl space underneath. Further plank removal uncovered a small safe and a tunnel beneath the steps, along with a shelf containing a key. The couple had a lot of valuables they wanted to protect. I took the key and gave the wall-mounted box a try. It worked. Extra keys appeared to be kept inside for all of the house's secure doors, including the barn hatch. Additionally, a piece of paper with secure combinations was included. 886544771321. Gun safe. That was a safe ammo for guns. 883011911413. Money. Our 50th anniversary and Dad's birth date. The last one struck me as especially poignant and depressing. They had shared 50 years of marriage. It was a great shame that they were involved in this nonsense. I stole the combination list and the extra hatch key. I climbed back up the steps. I was panicking because I had done something completely against the law. I didn't want to take any chances because I knew the folks in the basement might be armed. Nor could the older woman ever be charged with murder if the gun had not been found at the scene. My prints would have been everywhere if I hadn't chosen to wear woolen gloves that day to combat the cold. When I opened the safe, I discovered the shotgun inside. Was I going to take this on? It was a twin barrel that was under and above. The barrel appeared substantial and was lengthy. It was heavier than it seemed when I picked it up, and I was still shocked that an older woman could handle it. Then I thought of the garage. It had to be stocked with goods. Perhaps some zip ties or anything else was inside. With a sigh of resignation, I left the shotgun in the crawl space and headed upstairs, out of the farmhouse and toward the garage. I realized the sensor I had placed there was still there when I returned to hide there all those years ago. Were these devices capturing video? I hoped so. It appeared that the battery was dead. In the hopes of removing the footage once I got home, I packed it in my backpack. I rummaged around the packed garage and picked up a couple of loose zip ties. I returned downstairs and secured my flashlight with a rubber band to the side of the shotgun barrels. I hurriedly ran to the fuse box, flipped the barn basement fuse, and started down the tunnel. I was sure the individuals inside hadn't found the tunnel, as they wouldn't have entered through the secured hatch. I shook a little as I held the shotgun before me and turned off the safety. Eventually, I noticed a door, and that familiar stench disgusted me again. When I opened it, I discovered the two attackers' rotting bodies in the room's bathtub. I resisted the need to throw up while I unlocked the other door of the tiny space. When I unlocked it, I saw the same room Smith and I had previously visited. I regret having zip-tied the flashlight to the barrel as I uncomfortably lighted the workbench with the shotgun. A drawer on the bench caught my attention, filled with binders. Every one of them bore a name. There was one for every significant person and their offspring. I picked them up and put them in my backpack. At home, I had pictures of the board. Subsequently, the lights abruptly ignited. After discovering the fuse box, the men tripped the fuse. When I turned to look around, I noticed gas cans in a few of the room's corners. The stink of the dead overpowered the scent of the gasoline. I heard the shouts coming from the tunnel at that point. I wouldn't permit those individuals to utilize this data. I climbed the stairs, aimed the shotgun down the steps, and pulled the trigger. One barrel burst open, shooting buckshot into the basement and setting the gasoline on fire. The backlash threw me, painfully and unceremoniously, onto my ass. Rising, I dashed to my car and threw the shotgun into the footwell behind the seat. After turning on the engine, I left. I could see the fire spreading throughout the barn as I was leaving. Witnessing the building burn down was almost like getting closure. When I arrived home, I started to disassemble the sensor. I opened it and discovered an SD card which I put into my laptop. Videos with timestamps as their names filled the entire folder. I went through the more recent ones, trying to identify the assassin of the old couple. As expected, a video showed a man in a hood extracting something resembling a reel from the building's back entrance. He was visible as the second story blew apart, and he flipped a switch on the reel. He flipped a second switch, and as the reel appeared to rewind the trailing wire up, he ran away from the crime and out of sight of the camera. I had evidence that the couple had been killed. I only needed to figure out who was behind this. I went through the older woman's binders and found that every single one contained detailed information on everyone's life up to the day her house was broken into. Based on what I read, I concluded that the entrepreneur was working with the two children before the children broke into her home, and she shot them. Everything I required was here. Using a mobile scanner app, I painstakingly and methodically scanned every binder. I then used WinRAR to archive all the evidence I had gathered, including the logs I had been maintaining. I then set a password and forwarded Sam the archive and password. Not a reply. I held off for a week, but nothing. I kept messaging him to ask about him, and Smith emailed me to see if I had heard from him, but I am yet to get a reply from Sam. 2 weeks later, I received an email from him. Below is what it says. Brian, I cannot respond or share the most recent case if you're reading this. As a failsafe, this message was programmed to be sent if I didn't log into my computer for 2 weeks. This indicates that I'm probably dead, injured, or kidnapped. I recognize the risk associated with this field of work as soon as I began doing it for a living, and I'm sure you have too. This communication will include all the information I have gathered on my unpublished cases, including the one you have been assisting me with. The email address and password for a PayPal account with a sizable amount of money are also included. Think of it as your severance package or settlement. I've also attached a post detailing my disappearance that I would like you to publish. I intended to publish this piece, an autobiography of my career, once I retire, but I will be retiring early. Please make the case and any of my unreleased ones publicly available. Kindly forward copies of the cases to the appropriate authorities. You're a decent young man. You will never again work on the fucking dark web if you are a sensible person. This site is a curse. Good luck with that, from Sam. In amazement, I sat there. What on earth was I expected to do at this point? I sent Smith a message. He had gotten a similar communication, but instructed him to remove any evidence of his collaboration with Sam. Was I also in danger? I remembered feeling like I was being watched. This was a complete mess. I combined our two pieces of evidence into one repository. I printed out all the supporting documentation, stacked the heavy resulting sheets in my binder, and labeled it Farmhouse. Tears filled my eyes. Even though I worked for Sam, we were still friends. I responded to his request by posting a link to the archive and providing the password as proof. I pondered over how I would notify the authorities. Then, Sergeant Fred came to mind. He was also aware that there was something wrong with the farmers' deaths. I drove down to the station in the wee hours of the morning. I had already taken the shotgun out of my car. The evidence was on a USB that I carried with me. I went in to ask to speak with him. For a short while, I waited in a room before he approached me. I shook hands with him and went to his office. I gave the USB to him. "What's this?" His question was laced with nervousness. "It's everything I own about the old couple from the burned-out farmhouse. It's not just that. Once you go through it, everything will become clear. You must realize that what I'm about to provide you exposes a great deal of crime. Because of the facts, you will be praised as a hero. However, I'm giving it to you because I've been given witness protection. I nearly died several times while trying to collect this stuff for you." He gave me a confused, scared face as he glanced at me. After plugging in the USB, he started to go through the data. "Holy crap, I have some questions for you. While we will utilize what you say, nothing about you will ever be mentioned in court." I gave a nod. He hit a button on a gadget that sat on his desk. Now and again, he would pause his file, flipping to pose a question. I would respond briefly and in depth. He conducted a brief interview to wrap up our conversation. "If I felt unsafe," he said, "police could get me and take me home." I reassured him that I would be all right and inquired what would follow. He claimed that everything would need to be confirmed by an investigative team to rule me out as a perp who was plotting. I gave a nod and walked out, shaking hands again. I took the shotgun and cartridges inside a bin bag and drove home, putting them in an AC unit that was almost as old as the burned-out farmhouse. The police spoke with me and developed the case throughout the following year. They saved the children by raiding the drug farm. All of their parents spoke candidly about the blackmail. The businessman who started it all was detained for numerous offenses. That gets me to the current moment. A portion of the proof that the business owner is having analyzed has vanished out of nowhere. I'm sharing my experience because he could be freed. Everyone must be aware of what transpired. I'm publishing everything to ensure Sam's sacrifice wasn't in vain. I don't care if I'm doing it the same way as you are. This must be made public. By the way, I had to get out of witness protection to write these last entries, so I mentioned I was out of town with friends. Although my life is in danger, I'm hoping that by disclosing everything, my assailants will retreat because they stand to lose nothing by keeping me silent. Story 2. Dark Web Gone Wrong. The dark web has always piqued my interest. According to those who have visited, it can lead to websites that conduct human experimentation, hire hitmen, and even allow users to observe others through their security cameras. I didn't spend much time on the first website I came on because it was so heavily focused on death, which made me feel incredibly uneasy. I then went to the website devoted to using security cameras to watch people. The majority of the screens displayed deserted patios and living rooms. Still, a few had strangely furnished spaces, such as one decked with vintage Halloween props, and another crammed full of stuffed animals. I had a bad feeling inside, like what I was doing was disgusting. To quell any further curiosity, I shook my head and blinked. Then, I moved my mouse over the little X to close the window. I saw a blue link beneath a dark screen that warned, "Proceed at your own risk," just before I clicked the mouse. No matter how sick my stomach felt, my curiosity always won out as I watched the link turn purple with my mouse down. The page opened to a large, dimly lit area made of concrete. Everything had an odd green tint, as if there was a night vision camera or something. But something caught my attention in the room's corner. It appeared to be a person's forearm. How absurd is that? At this point, the person moved to the center of the space. It was a young woman with long, dark, untidy hair and tangles, who appeared to be no more than 21. She was limping on one leg due to a broken ankle, and her head was lowered, staring at the ground. The woman lifted her head abruptly, which appeared like a heavy burden on her small frame. It was apparent now, something I had not observed before, only being able to make out her side profile with difficulty. With tears welling up in her eyes and black makeup cascading down her cheeks, she peered around, her lips sealed together with a white thread. My stomach felt ill, and my entire body felt weak. I tried convincing myself that it was all a big scam, that it was all fake. I looked to the lower left of the screen and saw that 20,571 people were watching. The girl grabbed a cardboard that said, "If anybody is watching online, please help," and held it up to the camera. Her voice faded in her throat as she closed her lips, but I could still hear the muffled sobs. I closed the page and hurried to my partner since I could no longer watch it. "You won't believe what I just witnessed, Lisa." "Hi, dear. Have you been in tears?" she inquired. "I understand that you advised me to avoid the dark web, but..." I was in the middle of saying something when she attacked me. "Are you joking with me or what? You never, ever listen to me when I tell you to avoid that place. You never, ever do. A girl is stuck in a cellar, and her lips are like, oh God. Lisa, I'm at a loss for what to do. Her mouth appears to be stitched shut, and her hands and face are covered with blood." She stopped me saying, "Don't be stupid. You don't know if it's fake. I should call the police. Drop it. It's all an act to attract filthy spectators who are just like you." I went to bed without saying anything and didn't get much sleep. I would always see the woman's face, the thread tucked into her lips, the red liquid staining her mouth, her fingers, and the floor whenever I closed my eyes or even tried to go to sleep. As my anxiety and uneasiness grew, I thought that perhaps leaving the house would help me to calm down. After grabbing the house keys, I emerged onto the sidewalk. I walked down the block after crossing the street. After walking for 30 minutes, I became aware of a dark van pursuing me. They were moving carefully and with extreme stealth, not letting forth a sound. I was about to approach them when my phone rang, and it was Lisa, my girlfriend. The van also stopped. She must have found herself alone in the house when she woke up. When I answered the phone right away, all I could hear was Lisa screaming while covering her lips. That's when it hit me, sending a shiver of terror down my spine as I fled back toward the house. Lisa wasn't in the bedroom when I pushed through the door and got there. "Where are you, Lisa?" No. Lisa called me again, but it was a male on the other end this time. "Now I hope you avoid the dark web, little boy. That site isn't for kids." Story 3, Hidden Behind. My entire life has completely changed, and I haven't seen my family in days. They even boarded up all the windows and sealed all the doors from the outside before they vanished and left me alone at home. My sole means of contact with the outside world has been the dark web, which I can still access, even though my internet has been turned off. They took my cell phone with them. Strange, huh? The Bluetooth transmitter found on most laptops enables me to ping nearby machines and use Bluetooth to construct a virtual internet. I would have been totally cut off from communication had it not been for this. I've been aware of the dark web for years. Mostly I used it to browse around sporadic forums in an attempt to find interesting material. But since I was confined to my house, I also looked for ways to escape. I woke up on my third day without my parents and immediately went to my computer. I typed out my issues, .onion, and hit the enter key. Here was a chat site where you could discuss anything that was disturbing your mind. Most conversations revolved around personal problems. Unlike another website that rhymes with shredded, this one never had any censorship, which is why I enjoyed it. Moderators have no authority to remove posts or impose word counts on you, so feel free to discuss anything you like. My nickname was NK, and I typically just posted about my anxiety. However, this time, I shared my current story and captioned it. My family left me, I'm locked inside my house, what should I do? It was a breath of new air. Drink your parents' alcohol, replied a user going by the moniker of Vigor. I shot back, yeah, that might be cool, but what's the fun in that? I have no one to drink with, so I'll pass on the killer hangover. Vigor texted back, yeah, that is true. I forgot you are locked in, without pausing. Have you made any attempts to flee? Yes, I said. But there's no use. The home has new metal doors. The windows are boarded over, and my parents are probably coming back any day, so this will all stop soon. Vigor replied, I believe you should give it a little more effort. Horror was the name of the new user that entered the chat. Horror remarked, hey, NK, I'm sorry you're locked up like that by your parents. I was locked up by my family a few years ago, so I understand how you feel. Whoa, why were you locked up and how did you manage to escape? I questioned. Horror didn't end there. When I was a little child, my family made me take a certain sort of medication because they thought I had too much energy and it would help me relax. I began to lose track of time after taking the medicine for a few months. I would forget entire days and be unaware of what had happened. My family started to get scared of me, and before I knew it, I was trapped in a room. How then did you leave the room? I inquired. The horror didn't stop there. My room's door would only open and close once a week when I had a guest. My mother would usually pay me a visit once a week. She was the only person who showed me any concern. We would converse about life, and she would assure me that I would soon leave this place. I could always tell by the sound of her voice that that wasn't going to happen. I had a secret knowledge that my father was the reason I was in this room in the first place. He had never been proud of me, and had made me take the awful medicine. One week in particular, my father paid me a visit instead of my mother. I was so furious that I threw myself at him as soon as he opened the door, strangling him until he was dead. I then went out the door and into the wide world, and I haven't been back since. Whoa, I typed back, that is quite the story. And so, NK, what are you going to do? Horror inquired. I would probably simply stay on the dark web here, I'm not sure. I said, well, I spend most of my days in my room. NK, it's a trap. You will eventually become comfortable and happy inside the small box you're in. Thus, the longer you stay in your room, the more of a hold they will have over you. You must leave NK as soon as you can. How can I leave? All the doors are locked and I can't seem to open any windows. I typed back, consider NK. Since you've been imprisoned, has your door opened at all? Horror inquired. The door creaked open and then it instantly locked shut, as I seem to recall. I said, that's all I know. Exactly. Someone is keeping an eye on you, NK, whether you realize it or not. You're in a unique state, therefore you must pay close attention to what I say. Your family probably watches you when you're asleep, so tonight, keep your eyes open, be prepared for your door to open, and let the person in. Once they're inside, make a move to strangle them or lunge at them. This person doesn't care about you. They just want to take your life away, just as they did to me. You can leave when you've killed them. Venture out into the world and discover the essence of existence. Quite shocking, I responded. I think that's a little drastic, don't you think? My family deserves the best, even though I was never able to reach them. Horror replied, that's the only way out, NK. If you don't do something right now, you'll never be able to leave your room. I know people who have been stuck like that for their entire lives. You'll gradually start to become insane and deviate from reality. I was unsure of how to respond to this. Was it true? Would I be confined to my room indefinitely? This was not conceivable in any manner. Horror, I replied. You're probably just a dark web troll, and I don't think you know what you're talking about. I'm only trying to help you, so either follow my advice or leave it, NK. I wish you the best of luck. And he left. I was alone in the chat room now, unsure of how to interpret the counsel I had just received. Suddenly, Blade, another member, entered the discussion. Since Brandon is my elder brother, I felt a connection to him. I felt a connection to this stranger right away, even though I knew it couldn't be him. Blade, I noticed you recently joined the chat. Could you perhaps offer some guidance regarding my current circumstance? I inquired. He typed back, I made your situation, brother. I am the reason you're locked up. There is no way this could be my real brother, which broke my heart. The one drawback of the dark web is that trolls are omnipresent since you can do anything you want without getting banned. I asked, why don't you go troll someone else? I want real help and advice. Really, no. Blade answered, NK, I'm your brother. It's been a blast. I just wanted to say how happy I am with Mom and Dad without you around. I was starting to lose my cool because this person was seriously trolling me. I answered, get the hell out of this thread. You are not welcome here. He questioned, remember all those times we raced to eat our vitamins when we were kids? Blade's inquiries caused me to halt abruptly. How was this knowledge known to him? It was becoming personal, I suppose. I questioned, if you really know who I am, what is my birth date? August 7th, 1995 is the date of your birth. Alright, my birth date can be found on any social media platform by searching for it. When I was a child, I owned a plush polar bear. What was his name, I wondered. This jerk could not have guessed this. Blade answered, your foolish polar bear was named Alvin. My brother had to be here. How could he have known I would be on this site? I felt a sudden icy sensation run through my body and all the blood flowed out of my face. I asked you how in the world did you know I would be here? He answered, we monitor everything you do, NK. My own brother had betrayed me, I felt. I said, why would you track everything I do, thinking that we were friends and that he only wanted what was best for me? Because you pose a risk to both yourself and those around you, Blade retorted. You've always had dangerous tendencies. When you were 5 years old, you nearly drowned me in the pool. We tried medication, but you refused to take it. So I made up a pretend game to remind you to take your vitamins. That was the only way we could persuade you to take your prescription. I became enraged because these were all lies and there was no way Blade could be telling the truth. I became enraged very soon and became blindly angry. He answered, you are a danger to the world, NK. I am sorry it had to be this way, but you are trapped here forever. Falsehoods. These are complex falsehoods. There was no way he was telling the truth. Something inside of me was aroused by my wrath. As I opened my eyes, the entire space was covered in white. All the surfaces felt velvety to the touch, and my sheets tore apart as I tugged on them. What kind of place is this, goddammit? I pondered in my mind. Suddenly, my brother Blade entered the room. The doctor mentioned that NK was improving, and he had brought some food for you. Horror was right. I realized now was the moment to take action. If I do not attempt, I will never be able to leave this room. I hurried to embrace Blade by putting my arms around his neck. He struggled and wriggled, but soon his body went slack as my grip tightened around his neck. I spread him out on the ground. Oh my God, a man in a white lab coat came in. God, I can't believe what happened. I sprinted right by him. I raced and never stopped, getting out of the room that was haunting my dreams. I may now at last explore what the world is indeed all about. I love how this feels. Horror was right. Story 4, a video from dark web that ruined my life. Before college, I had heard a lot of news about school cults and rituals. I thought it was just mere talk until I witnessed it. My name is Amos, and I'm just 18 years old. I was pretty good with the internet and computer. You can call me the computer wizard. While in college, I came across a guy and wanted to be like him. Apparently, I got info that he was the leader of a fraternity house. I wanted to join them, so I spoke to the dude ASAP. If you wish to join the fraternity, you must complete the hazing. The collegiate jocks of Sigma Beta Phi had another plan for my initiation ritual. I had assumed that I might have to go across the girls' dorm naked or drink an entire gallon of milk. Caleb, the fraternity house head, told me that there is a database on campus that contains all the nasty stuff that they've caught us doing. You aim to hack into it, remove everything, and give us a fresh start. Although I knew the college probably had greater firewall security than any other internet I had managed to get past, I still wanted this, so I agreed and began to work at it once. Looking back, I regretted boasting about my computer expertise. Since I barely had 24 hours to complete the assignment, I naturally tried to decipher the various encryptions late at night. By 4:30 a.m., I could scarcely think clearly and was running on fumes. Nevertheless, I managed to crack the encryption and gain access. Since the firewall was down, I could view every file the school possessed on each of its students. I was so happy at first that I almost texted Caleb to tell him the good news. I started to second-guess myself because he had practically threatened me to uncover and obtain this information, so what evidence did they have against him? Is it possible for me to blackmail him to get a higher rank in their social hierarchy? I entered his entire name into the search bar, and a ton of surveillance footage featuring him appeared, all with a date and timestamp. The big win was this. I excitedly opened the latest file and watched, believing this would be just what I needed to even the score. Instead, I observed a gathering of people in a circle with what appeared to be a naked girl in the center of a field on the college grounds. They were all clad in blood-red cloaks. It dawned on me abruptly that they were chanting. Subsequently, people began to sever their wrists to extract blood and create a sign on the ground. Throwing aside his hood, Caleb commanded the others to join him in prayer as their sacrifice began tonight. They all began repeatedly stabbing the unconscious female. I instantly logged out and had a terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. This was a cult, not a fraternity. I scrambled to think of something to do. I have no choice but to post these videos online. I got back on and contacted a seller on the dark web black market because I knew how to go to the most hidden places on the internet where items like this might go viral. He stated that since cult videos are popular right now, this should bring in a reasonable amount of money. I told the seller, "Call it leverage, I don't care about the money. I want to make sure they can't hurt me." He persisted in sending me the money anyhow, and to be very honest, I was so sleep exhausted that I agreed to anything to end the talk. I then passed out until the following morning. Upon re-examining the database after I woke up, I saw it had been completely erased. At first, I assumed it was just my imagination creating the whole thing. Then, I noticed 2 emails. One from the vice principal's office asking for my appearance, and the other from the vendor thanking me for the films. I quickly rushed over there after swallowing another large lump. "Is everything okay?" As I walked inside the office, I timidly requested. Without a word, they flipped their monitor and displayed the same repulsive ceremony I had witnessed the previous evening, only this time I saw my face in place of Caleb's. She added sternly, "I've already called the police. Please pack your belongings and realize you will be kicked out of our institution." I was stunned and confused, realizing that Caleb had framed me. I didn't know how until I returned to my dorm room and rechecked my email. Deep web fakes are more in demand than ever these days. Story 5, Facecam. The dark web was the website that completely transformed my life. All I had to do was download the Tor browser and do anything I pleased. That's when you start acting recklessly, and that's when I was with my friend. That night, we stayed up until midnight viewing terrifying YouTube videos of dark web encounters. We had no idea this would lead to an awful event we would never get over. "Oh no," Dave said. "This shit is creepy." "Do you understand what this means then?" I said, "We're going to try it for ourselves." After 5 minutes of waiting for it to download, I downloaded Tor, and we were ready to go. I immediately looked for dark web red rooms, but nothing noteworthy turned up. I kept doing this for a few weeks, finding nothing unusual other than gory and nude photos. However, these were nothing compared to the horrors we had heard about on YouTube, so I kept digging deeper and deeper into this underappreciated area of the internet. Every time I performed better, my confidence grew. I was at a sleepover with my friend Dave the night of the incident. We looked up dark web chat sites and discovered one called Chat for Free Online Deep Web Chatting Site. I responded, "Great, let's look at this then." Huge error. Looking back, I don't blame Dave for being cautious before we clicked on it, but I was overconfident. I felt confident because I didn't see anything negative when I was on the dark side of the internet. "Alex, are you sure it's safe?" "Yeah, totally," was my response. "What could go wrong?" I then clicked. Immediately, I was inundated with multiple pop-up advertisements, and my computer became unresponsive. However, since my machine was outdated, I reasoned that there was no harm in it. After removing those pointless advertisements, I was greeted with a website that said, "Welcome to free chat. Click start when you're ready." It took a while for the loading circle to appear on the screen before we finally met Luca, 999, our first user. We skipped over Luca because our camera was on while he was off, showing us a blank screen. However, it would help if you remembered that Luca 999 is his username, which we will discuss later. As usual, we met a few members on our free chat service, along with many vacant screens. Our second encounter with Luca 999 ended in an empty room. Nobody was present, although his camera was turned on. Then the message, "Luca is typing, hey," appeared in the chat window. "Dave, what should I say?" I let out a cry. Dave seemed trembling and was not in the mood to respond to my question. "Hello," I sent a message, expecting no reply. I told Luca where I reside, though. We were both shaken by that question, so I quickly closed the page and deleted my search history. We ultimately fell asleep, leaving the computer facing us, which was a poor choice. After that, we stayed awake for a while, thinking about Luca and who he was. When I woke up at 3:20 a.m., the computer was on with chat for free, but the website's screen appeared darker and more eerie. I immediately woke Dave up and we were both terrified. I noticed we conversed with Luca 999 as I approached the computer gradually, but it wasn't blank this time. Although his face cam was positioned in the chair, it displayed us smiling, and neither Dave nor I had ever smiled like that. We were sitting there quivering in terror, more terrified than ever, as a deep male voice announced our address. I lacked the strength inside me to take action. Sadly, it wasn't a nightmare despite feeling like one. Behind us, Luca's face cam captured the shadow of a man. I'd say 6 feet, although I need to figure it out. A weapon was seen as the man in his face cam drew closer behind us. He held it up as he approached. On the other end, Dave and I were both grinning. That smile was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was horrifying as the man chopped away at my neck with his weapon. I wanted to puke, but the adrenaline shot me through the roof and broke the computer in two. With my pulse pounding and my hand covering my head out of panic, I felt like butter broke from the rush of adrenaline. Dave continued to resemble a corpse and was pale white. I started crying as I stomped on the computer till it was utterly destroyed. Do you hold me accountable? I still find it terrifying to consider anything related to the dark web, especially that particular incident. This incident occurred 4 years ago. Because of COVID, Dave and I haven't communicated in 6 months, but we hardly discuss it now. I would prefer to forget about the face cam incident as I don't have a logical explanation. And just a quick reminder, never go on the dark web. You don't know who is watching you. I hope you enjoyed these stories. Don't forget to hit us in the comment section below. Let us know the next story you'd like from us. Also ensure to check out any of our videos displayed on your screen with just a click.